The God's Not Dead franchise is back with a brand new film that just hit theaters this weekend in limited release. I am a really big fan of the God's Not Dead movies in a very ironic way, as I found these movies to be really hilarious and stupid and over the top, especially when I saw the first movie 10 years ago in the theater, and that was my introduction to Christian cinema. And at the time, I was like, wow, this is so good, inspirational. But as the years have gone along and I've learned more about filmmaking and writing and just movies in general, these movies just became so much funnier to me, and I understood the references and the overall picture because I had been going to church. But with the previous two installments of this franchise focusing more on the political aspect, with the last film being about homeschooling, and now this movie, of course, is about the upcoming election. And this film doesn't shy away from being about Christian propaganda, as all of these films have been, where Christians are feeling like that they're being persecuted because there have been so many different changes in our society and norms and laws. But in any case, these movies have always been very entertainingly terrible. But with this newest installment in the God's Not Dead franchise, I was a little nervous that this movie wasn't going to be as funny or entertaining as the other movies. But as a God's Not Dead fan, this movie was very disappointing. If you're like me and you enjoy how ironically terrible these movies are, you're going to be very disappointed. This movie takes itself way too seriously. This movie is a lot more grounded, and the story actually makes a lot more sense. Objectively, I can say that this is one of the better made films. The film looks better, the acting's a lot better, the dialogue is bearable for this type of movie. Like, what it is going for, it is actually pretty watchable, considering the other God's Not Dead movies are really hilarious and terrible. But the crime that this movie commits is just by being really boring, and it's just a bunch of talking in every single scene. There's really not a whole lot going on in this movie. It's just Pastor Dave talking to somebody, then he talks to somebody else, and then he talks to somebody else, and then you get a bunch of Christian propaganda shoved into your face with a bunch of Bible verses, and it's just for the Christians to be like, oh man, I'm listening to a sermon even though this is a film. I want to actually know what the characters are saying and not being preached at like every other film, which has been a major issue among all 5 of these films. But this film does have a ton of hilarious moments in this movie, especially a couple of montage moments where they mention the vaccine and COVID, which I didn't think this movie was actually going to do, and those moments were pretty funny and stupid and what I came to see. But other than that, this movie claims to be all about the truth, and people are afraid to talk about the truth, but the movie doesn't actually do that. It actually bounces around it so many times and doesn't actually say what it wants to say. It's pretty vague throughout, which is pretty surprising for a God's Not Dead movie. I honestly wish that this movie would just flat out say, hey, we need to have Christian people be the politicians, but they don't want to dive into those things. I'm not really sure why, and I truly feel like this franchise doesn't know what it wants to be anymore, because I think people are kind of realizing that Christians aren't being persecuted, so now they're switching gears to be political and be like, well, we can capitalize on the conservatives who are maybe Christians already and be like, yeah, the things that are going on are really bad, but this movie doesn't actually have anything to say. I know I'm talking a lot about conservatives and Christians and propaganda, and all of that stuff is still really terrible, but if we're going to talk about this film just purely on the filmmaking, the writing, the acting, like I always do, all those things are just really bad. This movie looks terrible. It has bad music like all the other films. The basic storyline is so stupid. The other candidate that Pastor Dave is going up against is just like a comic book villain of sorts, where he's just sitting there like and he has his alcohol and he's like, he's never gonna win. Like, those scenes are hilarious, and I wish I got more of those. But when this movie is trying to be really serious and pretty boring, it does make those scenes feel so jarring. To be honest with you guys, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this movie, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really disappointed with it, because these movies usually have a lot to say and there's more personality to it. And this is what happens when you don't have director Harold Kronk, who did the first couple of God's Not Dead movies, where I feel like he actually had a voice with those films. And sure, they're terrible, and I gave each of them like a 2 or 1 or whatever I gave those films, but at least they were really entertaining and enjoyable. And that's why there's a new football movie that's coming out in October that is directed by Harold Kronk. I am actually ironically very excited to watch that movie. But this movie just takes itself in a really boring direction, and I don't think this movie's gonna do very well at the box office. This franchise is truly running out of gas because it has nothing else left to say. I'm giving God's Not Dead, In God We Trust a 2 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. As I want to know below in the comment section, have you seen this film? And let me know all of your crazy hate comments that I know that this video is going to get, like the previous God's Not Dead film, and saying I don't understand it, even though I've watched these movies. I don't understand it. I'm a little snowflake and all of this stuff. I can't wait to read all of your comments and to respond to them because it's going to be a great time. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys at the movies.